Instagram and we can talk. Uh-huh. Okay, 1 second. All right. Connect streaming. Okay. So Instagram is ready to go live. Instagram is live. And so, all right, Nathan.
Howdy.
Hi. And so we just give people like a minute just to connect. And so I put it on different social media handles. And so however people are able to join us will be perfect. So,
Sounds good.
all right, you're going to have to introduce yourself to us.
For sure. Yeah. So my name is Nathan Prang. I am a financial advisor with Edward Jones. So I've been in this role for about a year now, but prior to that, I was
Sorry,
good.
Nathan. Sorry,
Yes,
Nathan.
fine.
Give me a second. It's 12:59, so just give me a second. And
Oh, yeah.
are we ready? Okay, let's
You
go.
good? Okay, let's go. Yeah, so my name is Nathan Prang. I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones. Prior to that, I spent time in public education for 17 years, serving as a teacher and coach, did administrative work, was the elementary principal for 4 years prior to taking this role. And so, yeah, so now I'm here in the financial advising world, just enjoying educating people in a different way, for sure.
Awesome, awesome, Nathan. Okay, so Nathan is going to be discussing a lot of things with us, especially the road to financial independence, right?
That is correct.
So let's get educated. And you want to share some slides with us before we go into.
For sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah. So let me go ahead and get that on full screen mode over here, and I will share this screen with us.
Okay.
And there we go. Should be coming up on your end.
All right. There we go.
Awesome. Wonderful. So yeah, let me get this going here. All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about really is successful investing kind of requires deciding what you're trying to achieve and then outlining the steps to be able to get there. And it also requires discipline and most of all, a little bit of patience. That's why I recommend having a documented, written investment strategy to help provide all of these things. But before you can really start talking necessarily about investment strategies, we have to get to know you and understand what it is that you want to accomplish because everybody is so different. Everybody has different goals, strategies, everybody has different amounts of income. So everybody's situation is different. So there's nothing that is more important than understanding what it is that you specifically need. So
Mm,
as far as your strategy goes, so we like to focus on a couple of things. One is long-term goals. Two is what we call duration. So your length of time that you actually want to invest, which is also known as your investment time frame. The third side is your level of risk. So how risky do you want to be? And that could be based on, past experiences that you've had in the market
mm,
or, just different people's situations that kind of change. And so
yeah.
that comfort level with risk. And then finally, the steps required for you to get from point A to point B. So it's important to just kind of have that written strategy. And the more you can outline what you're trying to achieve, the more you can kind of tailor a strategy in order to be able to meet those needs that you have, right? So you could have several long term goals. It doesn't necessarily have to be as simple as retirement,
Mm,
because in retirement, there might be a bunch of stuff that you want to be able to do, right? So the more that you outline these things, whether it's several long term investing goals, short term investing goals, things that you might be planning, like we're talking about vacations, kids' college,
mm,
buying cars, all these fun things that we get to spend money on on a regular basis, right? It's important to kind of have all those things down there. And so that's the most important piece there is to go ahead and start with developing some sort of strategy. So that's where a financial advisor kind of comes into play to help outline and prioritize these goals. Because, kind of like as you and I were talking about earlier before this, it's sometimes really hard just to even talk to our family or our spouses about these types of situations because financial stuff is such a hotbed topic, right? Sometimes it's like stepping on a scale. We really don't want to see how much we weigh, right? Even though we know that no matter if we step on the scale, that's what we're at. But sometimes just having somebody to be able to help you develop that strategy and walk you through that is kind of important.
Yeah.
So that's obviously like rule number one. The second one is understanding the concept of risk. So you've likely heard of this concept of risk versus reward, and risk and return generally go hand in hand. So the higher the return potential that you want, so you saying, I want to make a big amount of money, the more risk you'll have to kind of accept. When it comes to investing, it's kind of crucial to understand how that risk and return kind of go hand in hand. But you shouldn't lose sight of what could be the biggest risk when you face, which is not reaching your long term goals that you set when you develop that strategy at the beginning. So there are several types of investment risk. You know, you have economic inflation, which everybody, that's a really big topic. Interest rate risk, really big topic right now. So that's just a few that are out there. However, a lot of investors often think of risk as the potential for declines, because it just risk kind of has that negative connotation to it. It's like, oh, if I'm taking risk, I'm going to lose something. But risk means more than just the potential for fluctuations in value. But it also won't provide any growth potential to keep up with inflation. So the key is ensuring that you have the appropriate amount of risk for you, right? That's set up for you, not too much and not too little, just to be able to achieve your goals, which came with step one, which is having that strategy, right? So that's kind of a big focus that's there. Um, so then to determine what makes sense for you, here are three questions when it comes down to risk that I think are really important. One is, what is your comfort level with risk? Because understanding this can help you determine how you may react to the market fluctuations, right? When things go down, how are you going to react to that? How are you going to feel in those moments? And then when the market goes up, how are you going to respond to that too? The second is, how much risk are you able to take? So the amount of time that you have to invest plays an important role in determining how much risk that you're actually able to take. That's that time horizon piece. And then finally, how much risk do you need to take? So you'll also want to determine the return, therefore the risk that might be necessary for you to reach your goal. So if you're trying to have X amount of money by the time that you retire, you might have to figure out, well, what level of risk do I have to take in order to get there? Because again, that risk return kind of goes hand in hand. So that's pretty big pieces whenever it boils down to that idea of risk. The next is diversification. So when we talk about diversification, we talk about asset allocation. So it's, how diversified am I in my investing, in my portfolio? So you guys probably heard of mutual funds, stocks, bonds. We all know what cash is. We talk about investing internationally, all these different things that are out there to diversify your portfolio that can tailor to what your situation actually is. So that's really important. So diversification does not ensure a profit or protect against any loss, in the declining market. So like in 2022, no matter how diversified people's portfolios were, a lot of people suffered a lot of loss during that time, right? So even though they were diversified, but it can kind of help for a smoother ride over time because it reduces those swings, those negative swings in the portfolio value. So when a single investment is made, or a single investment performs poorly, it's a disappointment, and it's not so much as much of a disaster, because you're like, well, I have that one thing that I did have that one fund or that one piece I invested in that didn't do well, but I had this to kind of soften the blow, right? When it comes to that kind of stuff. So when it comes to diversification, starting with a mix of stocks and bonds is really good. Stock prices tend to fluctuate more over time, right? But they'll historically provide those higher levels of return. And then bonds typically fluctuate a lot less, but they do provide lower returns normally than stocks do. So since stocks and bond prices often move in opposite directions, combining them kind of help, again, soften that blow, reduce the swings in your portfolio value, which I think is really good. So rule number four is stick with quality. because quality is really good. So, of all the factors to consider with investing, we believe quality is one of the most important ones. So, it's also one of the most overlooked. For some investments, there's an easy way to measure quality, but for most, it does take a little bit of work. So, since stocks have larger price fluctuations than bond investments,
Uh-huh.
quality is frequently measured by the steadiness of earnings and dividend growth over time. So, since your total return in a stock is your combination of not just how much that stock went up, but also the dividends that that company might be paying within the ownership of that stock. And then
Mm.
for bonds, one measurement of quality is an investment grade credit rating. So this indicates the borrower, so the person who's borrowing the money has a good track record and is like has that making the promised interest that they're going to pay in the principal payments. And quality also means these investments are more likely to overcome temporary challenges over time, which is a good way to kind of track kind of that record of that municipality or the government or the company that the bond is actually with that's there. So if you receive like any, we call them like hot tips, right? So it's like, hey, we have this company that we know is going to be like on the rise and all that kind of stuff. So if you've received any tips on today's hot tip investments,
Mhm.
especially if they've already performed well, the best advice that we give as financial advisors is weirdly enough to ignore them actually. Although it may be tempting to buy like a specific popular investment, it may not fit with what your goals are or the rest of your portfolio and may be riskier than what you need. And it kind of goes against that diversification, right? That we talked about in rule number 3, too, which is a big piece that's there. So it may be tempting to look for like those specific investments that are offering this high return, but you have to make sure that it's going alongside with what you're trying to do with your portfolio and your long-term goals and all that kind of stuff that's there too. Um, so number 5 is invest for the long term. So the most successful investors, the people that are meeting their goals, make their money over the long course of time, right? So we believe that the most consistently successful investment strategy is to be diversified, be a diverse portfolio, and the plan to own those investments for a long period of time. So again, when we have those downturns, not just responding, be like, oh, I got to sell this off. It's about being patient, holding for a long period of time in order to meet those long term goals. So, one of the biggest mistakes that investors tend to make
Mm.
is trying to time markets, trying to be like, well, we know the market's going to start going down, so we should sell or we should do different things. And that's like the biggest mistake that can be made. Like this may involve moving money in and out of the market during that time, but unfortunately, this usually results in getting into and out of the market at the wrong time, costing time and money. So a lot of it again is that patience piece, recognizing your strategy, recognizing why is it that you are in the things you are invested in. But maintaining that long-term perspective is really, really helpful. Which moves on to rule number 6. So having realistic expectations. So be realistic. Being realistic can help you track your progress and hopefully long term reach your long term goals.
Mm.
So if you set those right expectations, in order to do that, you need to determine the return trying to achieve, which should be the return that you need to reach your goals. So if we keep it something simple and fixed, like if you're trying to raise X amount of money for your kid to be able to go to college. So you want to like start a 529 or something like that, right? You need to determine like what is a realistic expectation for that. If your kid's going to school 2 years from now and you've not started any kind of savings fund for them, is it realistic to say I'm going to get to $100,000? Well, I don't know. Maybe you just have $100,000 laying around, right? But you have to be realistic within that expectation. And so again, the whole goal is to be able or to work alongside someone like me as a financial advisor is to figure out, well, is that a realistic thing for you to be able to do? What is your risk tolerance? What is the level, what is the level of the amount of money that you're willing to put into this, and to be able to go from there. So we can kind of review, set that realistic expectation for ourselves, and then have specific goals that we can meet, which is really good. But like after you've set those expectations, the next step is to work is how to achieve them. So to help you achieve, there's two different principles that's there is don't count on averages, which means focus on the long term average return when developing your strategy. Long term average return, not just what happened over the last month, like long term average return, because the markets rarely experience average years. Okay. You can look at any kind of chart that's out there, and we have markets where sometimes it's, huge. I mean, we just even had a huge influx recently, right? Where we had some scare moments, and then we had one of the biggest days in terms of returns in history. So we have those backs and forths. Then the second is don't chase performance. So we've all heard that we shouldn't follow the crowd, kind of a thing, but it can be tempting to be able to chase performance. So this can lead to buying what has already gone up in value. So if you like heard of something and you want to invest in it, well, it might have already reached its peak, right? So if you know that it's there, you might invest high and then ended up like losing money over the course of time. So this can leads to buying what has already risen and kind of put you in a bad situation. So, which leads to rule seven, which is to maintain your balance. So, balance can be important in many areas of your life, right? So, we strive to balance work with play, right? So, we try to figure out we want to have fun, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we are the working and like in the course of your business and real estate, my business here, whatever everybody else does for their job. So, when developing a financial strategy, we focus on your asset allocation. And as I mentioned, this is designed to align with your risk tolerance and what you need to do to be able to achieve your long-term goals. So it's finding that good balance between those two. So, depending on how things perform over the course of your portfolio's existence, it could kind of steer away from your initial objectives, which means you might not be positioned, like if you have that long term goal that you've set, you might not be positioned to be able to meet that specific goal. So, it's having that conversation to be like, all right, what do we need to adjust within your portfolio in order to get us back on track? So, it's like you kind of steered off the course. What do we kind of do to be able to get back on track, which is there? The next is preparing for the unexpected. So this can be a morbid conversation talking about the idea of, well, what if something happens to me? What if something happens to my spouse? Those kind of things. But it doesn't necessarily always have to surround by like someone in your family dying, because you can hear about health insurance or life insurance and those kind of things that have sometimes we just have things that happen over the course of our life to where we have unexpected health expenses, job loss, like those kind of things that are there. So you have to be able to have a system in place that if you, let's say you lose your job, you're without income for 4 to 6 months possibly. Do I have something set aside strategically to where if this happens, even though I wasn't planning it, like most of the time people don't plan when they get laid off or something like that. But I know I have that because that's a stressful situation in my life that if I can take this strategy and say, well, even though I lost my job,
Mm,
I have this emergency fund. I have something here, right, to kind of soften that blow to make things a little bit better for me. So it's really just important to kind of prepare for that unexpected and having those conversations, even though it doesn't seem real now. It's a definite possibility that's there. So I think that's really important that people need to recognize that you need to have strategies in place if things like this do occur.
mm,
So really the protection is number one, your home health and your family, which I could say is my number one priority. Number two is your income. So that's your job loss, right?
mm,
That's that kind of thing. And number three is your assets. So you have that ability to say, okay, well, what is it that I own? Not just my financial assets, but also my assets when it comes to my home that I live in, like property, all those kind of things, right? Which is there's your neck of the woods, the property piece, right? That's the assets that are there too. So you have to find protection strategies for these types of things,
mm,
which is very, very important. Rule number nine, we got two more. Rule number nine is focus on what you can control. I always say control the controllable. So you have your time tested principles, not predictions. So you
mhm,
want to make sure that, again, it's that long term mentality, control what you can control. We can't, as a whole, right, as Americans, we can't just say, well, our decisions are going to control the market. That's not true. But what you can control is your decisions in diversification. Your
Mhm.
risk tolerance is something that you're just comfortable with, right? But you can control some of those decisions that you make, and then in your everyday life. Because a lot of the times when it comes down to, do I have what it takes in order for me to meet these goals? It comes down to sometimes the discipline that I have to have on a day to day, week to week, month to month basis in order for me to get there. And those are things that I can control. Now, there are some uncontrollable things and all of that. We can't control inflation, right? We can't control interest rates. We can't control those things, but we can react to them and make sure that we are diversified enough to where we are set up to be able to be successful.
Yeah.
So don't let emotions drive your decisions just because you see something going down, like the market going down. A lot of people obviously talking about the big election that's coming up, all those kind of things. There are multiple people who are living in retirement today who have overcome multiple election cycles, who were able to meet their goals, despite all those things that are really controllable. And think of the media. I mean, the media drives so much. If it's a down day, you better bet the media is talking about it. And if it's an up day, sometimes they will, right? But those trying to control your emotions and all that is important, which again is why having a financial advisor kind of helps, because it's somebody you can go to that can, maybe you can say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and you can have a back and forth conversation to hopefully dissipate some of those fears that you may have. And then finally, review your strategy regularly. um, in my mind, as a financial advisor, there are regulations set up to where we are supposed to be able to, we have to go over your portfolio, go over things regularly with you for you to be able to see where you're at. But to me, it's about the time in between those reviews that matter the most. Because if we are checking in with each other on a regular basis, I know what's going on in your life. I can understand what's going on, with different things that might be happening in your house, some of those unexpected things, uncontrollable moments. It will help us reach your goals better if we have those constant conversations about what's going on. So, and a lot of people, to be honest with you, some people are like, no, just call me in a year, but at the same time, most people appreciate the fact that there's somebody calling, checking in on them, just seeing how they're doing, being more proactive rather than just reactive to need, right? But reviewing your strategy regularly, making sure you're staying on course, making sure your risk tolerance is the same, just kind of understanding those things. But again, it's that constant conversation that you're having with somebody, that I think is the most important piece. So those are kind of like the 10 specific steps. But I would say, just to kind of add on to all of this,
Mm-hmm.
it's about having a relationship with someone,
Mm-hmm.
that you can trust, to be transparent with, to be honest with. And like on my side, I know that I've had my own life circumstances, right? And what really helps me through it is when I can go to somebody that I know is understanding and is willing to help guide me through all those kind of things, right? So we all deserve that person. We for sure always deserve that person. So
Yeah.
but those are kind of the basic 10 steps that sometimes are rules that I go over with people when they think about investing in general. And it's a lot of information, but in my mind, it kind of just boils down to, again, having a relationship with somebody that you trust that can help guide you through that, understanding your risk tolerance and what it is that you want to achieve, and
Mm.
then being able to, as you're going from A to B, from setting your goal to meeting your goal, just being able to have conversations through the downturns and that kind of stuff, and have somebody just to kind of keep you on track, right? To keep you in line. I'm sure, I mean, have there been moments for you in the real estate business where you're just like struggling? I mean, you feel it, right?
I feel what I feel everything you've said, especially the area where, because I was about to ask you that, how do you help check in,
Yeah.
just to make sure that you're not coming in after everything is messed up.
Yeah.
You want to come in right before or consistently before, so they feel comfortable to communicate with you when things are changing, so that those changes don't come abruptly. But I'm glad that you mentioned that um, part. I also wanted to ask, how often do you do that? How often will you be there to help check in, some people say they are financial investor checking once a year. That's checking in, but I mean
Yeah.
that,
Well, it just depends. I mean, it depends on the need, right? But like what I always bring forth first is a quarterly. So like a making sure like at least 4 times a year. But some people have even requested, more than that, which is fine. Because and as a year progresses, there's different things that go on, right? So like the holiday season is a big time. Number one, sometimes people don't want to be bothered, but
mm,
number two, sometimes people are spending a lot of money, right? So they might be steering off track and they don't want to tell their handy dandy neighborhood financial advisor that they've been
I,
spending more than they want to, right?
and for each client it will be different, right?
Yeah, for
How you
sure.
check in with A might be different from how you check in with B. I have so many questions, but let me go to another one before I go to the ones that were sent to me.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there are, I wrote here, I said, give examples of investments that go alongside with each other for a portfolio, for example, because you were saying something like it's better to make sure that you have investments in your portfolio that kind of align, so that way you're not, I don't remember how you explain that, but
Yeah.
can you give example of investments that you can that are quality and you can put together as an investor, so you're not like investing in stock here and bonds here that can't quite meet your needs or
Right, right, right. So the good part about working for us for Edward Jones or working with us is when we the first thing we talk about number one is your goals. The second thing that we talk about is your risk tolerance because when you talk about quality and diversification, a lot of that has to do with well, how heavy do you want your equity side to be? So, for example, if you're a growth focused kind of a person, so like you're willing to take some risk because you kind of have a long-term investment mentality and that's just the way that you're comfortable what you're comfortable in doing. We might try to focus on 80% in equities and 20% in income. So we start small, right? We're taking steps as we get there. So then we talk about, well, what do those equities look like? What do some quality investments, mutual funds, ETFs, those kind of things? What are some quality investments and some and Edward Jones provides like focus list of ones that are, and there's a lot, there's a lot of stuff to invest in, right? But it's like, what is it that can fill into there that provide us not just diversification to say, well, we're 80% equity, 20% income, but for the 80% equities, how much of it is large cap? How much of it is small cap? How much of it is international? And so we diversify even through that. So we kind of guide you through taking those baby steps and taking something that's really general and what can we invest in and then breaking it down. So here are your equities. Let's start breaking that down. Here is your large cap. Here are the stocks that pay dividends. So we start looking at those kind of things. Um, and a lot of people, are in the boat where they just want to be educated, but they don't want to make choices. Right. A lot of people are just like, I don't know enough about this stuff. I want you to help guide me through that. And so just depending on that, people's willingness to want to be able to make those choices and kind of dive. There's different programs that we have that people can go into that will allow for them to kind of be be a decision maker in a sense, but also kind of let analysts and those kind of people through Edward Jones build their portfolios for them.
Awesome. We have a question on the screen, and can you just respond to that? What's
Yeah.
your view about cashing equity from primary home for investment?
So does that mean like selling? Is that like selling a home, their primary home, like cashing it out and then investing, or what does that question mean?
Give us whatever you think it means to you. I mean, respond to that. I don't want to, but because I'm not really
Right, right.
of this person, so.
Right. And I think everybody's situation is different, right? So when we're talking about cashing equity from a primary home for investment, you're taking into account so many different things. Like, are you what is your current interest rate that you have on your home, or do you own it outright? There's a lot of people who talk about, well, I want to go into retirement, and they actually we plan and use their home, the sale of their home, as part of their retirement, portfolio. It's like we know that you're going to get X amount from it, right? The other end is sometimes they don't sell it and they just want to use it as a rental property. So we take that into consideration, right? So it just kind of depends on all that whole situation and that divert again. What else do you have going on? Because I can't say specifically. So if they have equity in their property, so like
Mhm.
let's say their property is worth $500,000 and
Okay,
they owe 200,000. I'm guessing that's kind of what the situation is.
I'm
It
guessing.
depends so much on interest rate. It depends on all those different things that are out there to ensure that is this meeting your goals? Because again, we're not just like a one-stop shop single investment kind of thing. We have so many short-term and long-term goals that we develop with our clients that it's not just based on all of that. So we'd have to see in my example, like if you have $300,000 in equity and you don't want to sell, like I don't know if that means, well, I'm going to refinance and take that 300. I whatever that situation is, it's just going to be different for everybody.
All right. So just so the question is answered. What if they want to take the 300,000 um out of the house? Where do you come in that? How do you help them use that? What's your view about
For
using that
sure.
cash?
Okay,
Yeah.
so like let's say you came to me with $300,000,
Mhm.
right? We would have it would be I know I probably sound like a broken record, but again, it's well, what do you need to be liquid? What is your short-term mentality? How much money do you have on hand right now in order to like let's say you're trying to go on vacation, you're trying to pay for your kids' college, you want to buy a car next year. Like all those things would be invested way differently than if you said, well, I don't need the $300,000 for another 10 years. I don't even care where it goes. And that's a completely different mentality because now you're saying, well, this is money that I don't care that if I have my hands on for a really long time. You're
Hmm.
going to invest that way different than if it's like, well, but I want to be able to use it for like maybe I want to take it out and purchase another property in a year. There's just so many different situations, but we'd have to figure out duration, short term, or is it long term? What do we want to use it for? What is our current situation and how would that help us in meeting all of our goals? So
Well,
that would be my answer to that is it's going to take a lot of conversation to figure out what is best suitable for you.
thank you. And it's 1:31. Just
We
a
did
minute
it.
past. Yeah, we did it. So I'm going to end the stream and we're going to talk about every other question later. Thank you guys for joining us. And we hope to bring Nathan again. If you have questions, please reach out to him on his phone number and email. Until next time, happy house
Thank
on.
you.